Let's get reaction now from Greg Feith, former senior air safety investigator with the National Transportation Safety Board. Greg, you're the person who knows what happens next. The GO team arrives tomorrow morning, but according to flight data, tracking data, that plane, something went wrong right away. It had just taken off before it tried to turn back and land. What might have gone wrong so quickly?
Well, one of the things, Elizabeth, is that the investigative team is going to have to try and find out what the purpose of the return to the airport was. There is some early indication that people on the ground may have heard an explosion or a loud bang. That could indicate an engine problem of some sort, which would have necessitated the airplane coming back. So, of course, one of the teams, the maintenance and, of course, structure systems and power plants groups, will be looking at that aspect of what that could have been if there was, in fact, a failure of one of the engines.
This was a very small airport without an air traffic control tower, so we don't have tapes. From him saying Mayday or I have an emergency to an air traffic controller. That will be a loss to not have that.
Absolutely, and anytime you have a lack of communication, that is either between the pilot and an air traffic controller, or even in this case, it's not certain whether or not this airplane was equipped with a cockpit voice recorder or any other recording device that could help investigators not only with the performance data of the aircraft and telling investigators exactly what was transpiring mechanically with the aircraft, but we don't know what was transpiring in the cockpit because this airplane can be flown by a single pilot. But Greg Biffle was a certificated pilot. He had a multi-engine rating. I don't know if, in fact, he was sitting in front, and it could have been that they were working together to deal with this problem if, in fact, Biffle was in one of the pilot seats. So
right, that was my first question, too. Was he flying or was he a passenger? Because I know he was a pilot himself.
Absolutely, and that's going to be a question that the board's going to have to try and answer. Given his qualifications, he may have relinquished any kind of control. He may have initially started flying, but he may have relinquished control to the other pilot that was on the airplane because of his qualifications and familiarization and experience in the airplane. And then they would have worked, at least tried to work together as a team to try and fix
right.
what was happening, or at least establish what was happening so that they could get the airplane back to the runway.
It feels like there are so many of these crashes involving NASCAR. Why is that? I mean, is this a sport that relies a lot on these small planes? Are they flying in and out of smaller places and therefore they're using these small private planes? There's just been a series of crashes involving NASCAR teams or NASCAR drivers.
You bring up a very good point, and the fact is that NASCAR, there are a lot of drivers that are in fact pilots. They are in fact aircraft owners, and it allows them to move on their schedule. When you look at Statesville, if you were to put this particular family and their friends and you go to Charlotte and get on a commercial airliner, you basically spend the whole day. This gives them that flexibility, especially during the race season where they're moving to multiple places in very short periods of time. A lot of the drivers are pilots. They may fly with a professional pilot. They may fly themselves. Alan Kowicki and a number of other famous drivers have been involved in aircraft accidents in the past. But again, they must maintain those airplanes as I, as a private owner, maintain my airplane. So we're following the same federal aviation regulations.
Right.
The real issue here, Elizabeth, is what happened, because that's what the NTSB needs to determine. Is there a problem with the aircraft? Was there a problem with the operation of the aircraft or the maintenance of the aircraft? Is there lessons to be learned that can then be pumped back into the aviation community from a maintenance standpoint or an operations standpoint?
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.